So we're now going to switch it up and go to our sixth receiver. I think wide receiver six we might have swapped of like who our ranking is, of who your wide receiver six is and who my wide receiver six is. We're going to start with a North Dakota State guy and Christian Watson. And this is a guy where I've seen so many different things about him and his projection. Some people call him a day 3 guy. Some people say he's going to sneak into the first round and be a first rounder. So we got to talk about him, but so many different avenues to look at in his game. Not just the pros, but also the cons that you're going to get with him. And the big thing is the level of competition coming out of the FCS. That's something that he's really going to have to adjust to. Going back to his time last year with Trey Lance, and even this year without Trey Lance, he was great. Insane combination of just height, size, and speed that is so rare in this league. You talked about his 40 time a little bit earlier, mentioned it, but a guy who's a little bit fluid. Josh Norris, a guy I watch a lot of on Underdog Fantasy, said he's a lot like DJ Moore in that regard. The fluid roundedness in his routes, not being as tight with it, and clean and on the cuts. But a guy who is a do-it-all player. Reminds me a little bit of an Alan Lazard in that aspect of you can task him with doing anything, working in the slot, working in the screen game, working downfield as a downfield threat, blocking in the run game, mixing in on special teams is his big thing as well. Being a kick returner, multiple kickoff return touchdowns at North Dakota State. This guy can be a weapon if you utilize him the right way, and I like him personally, but there is a lot of people who aren't quite as high on Christian Watson.
I actually thought you were going to go Jahan Dotson at 6. I love Christian Watson. The kid is an absolute stud. Out of this group, he's the fastest, he's the tallest, he's got the biggest hands of them. He's just so underrated. Now, he's not going to be one of the top 5 receivers selected in this draft, most likely just because of how talented those guys are, and obviously played a lot better competition throughout their time in college. There's no question about it, but Christian Watson might be my favorite receiver in this class. He's extremely talented, as I mentioned. He's got the physicals that you look for in a top wide receiver. And, he's just so good. His blend of size, speed, and length is absurd. If you get him into the right system as it looks like, he could go late first round, which means he'd be in a great offensive situation. It could be huge for him. Just to get a high-level quarterback play for him early on in his career, it could really help him develop into a special talent.
Yeah, I definitely see him being a day 1 pick in the first round. I think he sneaks in that second half of the 20s to the 32 section. I think a great spot is going to be the Green Bay Packers at 28, in my opinion. I would just love to see what Matt LaFleur could do with Christian Watson in his offense, and also mix him in on special teams, which has been detrimental in the past for the Green Bay Packers. Would work perfectly. He'd immediately step in and be the kickoff returner, starting at kickoff return day 1 for the Packers special teams. Rich Bisaccia will love him on that unit. But on offense, I think Aaron Rodgers would love this guy. The big thing, he's physical after the catch, and he has great ball tracking ability. That's what Rodgers loves in a wide receiver. A guy where he can just put the ball up for him and they can track the ball and make the catch, similar to what a lot of what Devontae Adams brought to the offense in Green Bay. I think Matt LaFleur would love it. I think he would love working with Watson and Alan Lazard in that offense, mixing those two guys around all over the field, putting them at so many different positions, in and out of the lineup. Would be a great situation at 28 for the Packers, and just go best player available at 22 would be my dream scenario for the first round. But even a team like the Chiefs, armed with 2 first-round picks, what is it? I think they have 29 and 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the Chiefs with 2 first-round picks could also be another spot. They brought in Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scaling, but I don't think they're done adding to their wide receiver room. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, another great offensive scheme where they can work in a Christian Watson into the fold and make him utilized on the offense and in the special teams as well in Kansas City. So a lot to like about Christian Watson. A rare prospect, but I think if you use him the right way, can really turn into something special.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, the one thing coming into this last college football season that I really saw that he needed to improve upon was his route running.
Mm-hmm.
He polished it well in 2021. He looked very clean coming out of his routes, which I was really impressed about, and that would have been my big knock on him. But he really improved it. He's going to get there. And hey, maybe the Green Bay Packers will go Olave Watson at 22 and 27, and you'll really replace Devontae Adams there.
Yeah, and you brought up like how he improved on his route running. I still think he has some issues, like I brought up with just the breaks, getting in and out. There's times where he has trouble really being sudden in his stops, and then breaking one way or the other and continuing the route. And that's what I talked about with Josh's comp of being similar to DJ Moore, of a more rounded approach to his routes. You talk about some in routes, some slants, some posts, those kind of things, just more rounded and not as clean cut as you would like them to be in order to get separation. But another thing that Lance Zierlein's scouting report on Christian Watson tells us at the bottom, a scout for an AFC team said that he was a great locker room guy and worked his tail off every day. That, with his rare combination of size, height, and speed, being a great locker room guy, that's what gets you drafted in the late first round. That's what pushes you up into being a first-round pick instead of a second or third-round pick. Is that kind of commitment, that kind of trust in a guy and love and what he can bring to your team outside of just on the field. But in the locker room, a team player type of guy is what I like a lot in Christian Watson.
I'm excited for him, and he deserves to be a first-round pick, and I think whoever gets him is going to be very, very happy with their selection.
So now we'll get over to Jahan Dotson, who's our number 7 player at wide receiver going into this year's class, out of Penn State. A little bit of an undersized guy compared to some of what we've talked about with the top 6 guys we've gone over so far. But while he's undersized, he has outstanding quickness, deep speed, great hands, very fluid, loose route runner. What I like about him is in and out of his breaks, he's able to accelerate back to that top speed right after a break. And also, like I talked about with Christian Watson, being able to beautifully track down a ball. That's what Jahan Dotson brings to his offense. And after the catch, great elusiveness, great speed. Overall, just a little bit of an undersized guy where I think he really might be placed in the slot, and it's going to be hard to make him work anywhere else on the offense.
I mean, I was really high on Jahan Dotson coming into the draft process early in January and February, but he's really fallen off for me. I mean, I don't really see him going into the first round. I think he's definitely a second-round guy. Mm-hmm. Out of the 7 of these guys, he's the one that could fall out, and maybe a Skyy Moore or something like that comes in. Or George Pickens, who didn't really play that much, but we'll get into that in a little bit. No, he's got great speed. He ran a 4.43 at the combine. My one big thing on him, other than his size, is sometimes on his route running, he drifts a little bit. He drifts just a tad, and then the coverage can come in, undercut it, picked. And I saw that a lot on the film when I was watching. But, I mean, he's still talented. He's a great slot receiver, as you mentioned. He's not going to be on the outside on an NFL team. But I think he goes early to mid-second round. He could be he'll be in the top 3 wide receivers that go in the second round. He's so talented.
Yeah, I think if he falls out of the first round, I think he's going to be an early day 2 pick. They're looking at who's left on the board going into day 2. People are going to see Jahan Dotson right there on the top of that list. So the Jaguars right off the bat at pick 33, I think could be interested in Jahan Dotson, what he can bring to a team. So if he doesn't go in the first round, I think he goes pretty early in the second round. But like you said, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see him try to squeak in there late. in the first. I had him I think my first mock draft, I had him going in the first round to Tampa Bay, if I remember correctly, which would be a good spot for him. That's a void that they've still have a little bit. Is this true slot receiver to that offense with Tom Brady and the rest of the difference makers? But I don't know if it's a route they go now in the first round with bringing back all the guys they have brought back to their team. But Jahan Dotson can be something special in the slot. Just overall, his ability to work in and out of breaks and that speed and elusiveness that he has is his trademark in his game. But has some issues as well that scare me a little bit. If I were a GM looking at some of these guys, you talked about how sometimes the coverage can catch back up to them. It can be able to get back in and make a play on them. So that kind of things I'm a little bit worried about. Looking into Jahan Dotson a little bit more, but overall, could be a guy who's easily an early day 2 selection.
Yeah, I really like your choice of the Buccaneers there in the first round. I really think that might be his only chance that he goes in the first round, because there's really no other team that's going to waste a first-round pick on a guy like Jahan Dotson when there are other better guys at other positions available. Because there are a lot of talented slot receivers that are going to go day 2. And, again, I think we'll talk about those in a little bit. But, I mean, the Buccaneers are a team where if you really want to emphasize your offense, you add in a guy like Jahan Dotson. Because that wide, after losing Antonio Brown, really your slot receiver is Scotty Miller, I guess. I mean, Jahan Dotson is a much more talented slot receiver than Miller would be. And just teaming him up with Gronk, Goodwin, and Mike Evans, that would be a scary receiving core.
So that wraps up our top 7 with Jahan Dotson, but there's still 2 other guys, not even in our top 7 we just mentioned, who still are getting a lot of buzz as of late, and a guy you mentioned earlier to start off, and a guy who was in Josh Norris's mock draft going to the Saints very early in the draft was Skyy Moore out of Western Michigan. And, I mean, Josh Norris had the all-time record last year for the most accurate mock draft, so you got to listen to what the guy says a little bit. So what do you see out of Skyy Moore as potentially being a sneaky first-round prospect at wide receiver this year?
I really like Skyy Moore. He's kind of one of those underrated guys. He's got good speed, he's got great hands, and he's able to produce. And that's one of the things I like about him so much, is he's going to be reliable for a lot of quarterbacks in the league. He may not be the most talented, he may not be the biggest, he may not be the most well known, but he's going to be reliable for you, and he's always going to be there. I really like him as an early to mid second round guy. I don't think he sneaks into the first round like Josh, but hey, you never know. I'll trust that guy with my life if it comes to mock drafts. And especially with the Saints, you never know who they go with. But no, he's a really talented receiver.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to like about him. He could be a guy that sneaks in, but a guy that I'm seeing a lot of buzz about, especially this week. And again, it's Packers Twitter that I follow a lot of, and they jump from guy to guy every other week, it seems like. But this week has all been about George Pickens at a wide receiver and how good of a fit he could be on the Green Bay Packers. Brian Gutekunst loves guys with strong RAS scores, guys that are on the younger side. I think the average is like around 21 for all of his, round 1 and round 2 draft picks have been, 21 years of age or younger with, a 9.3 or higher RAS score. And that all points to George Pickens. And last year, it was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, you remember my reaction when the Packers took Eric Stokes out of Georgia last year.
Yes, I do.
But when they took him out of Georgia, a little bit of a surprise, but it fit the mold. It fit the type that Brian looks for in his prospects in the first 2 rounds. And just like Eric Stokes last year, George Pickens this year out of Georgia again fits that mold where the Packers might make a move for him in the first round if they truly like this guy and what he can bring to the Packers offense. So Pickens, another one to look out for that has came out and got a lot of buzz as of late in the last week or so, being a sneaky first-round prospect. And honestly, George Pickens tore his ACL back last spring, missed all of his last season at Georgia during their national championship run. If he doesn't tear his ACL, I think he's a lock as a first-round guy this year. I think if he had another year to put everything together and really showcase himself in that final year at Georgia, he could have proved himself to being one of these first-round guys. And I think that teams might consider that and really believe in that and what he can do when fully healthy, to say, hey, at full health, this guy might be a first-round prospect, and they might justify it well enough to take him in the first round. So George Pickens, another one to consider being a first-round pick, makes it 9 wide receivers we've talked about today that could potentially be first-round guys.
I really like the George Pickens pick. He was one of the guys where, going into the season, I was really high on him. Like, if he didn't tear his ACL, I was watching him. He's a year out from tearing his ACL. He ran a 4.47 in the combine. He's quick. He's 6'3". He's 195, 32 3/8 for his arm, which is one of the biggest of the 9 that we've talked about. The one thing that's a little concerning, 8 3/4 for his hand size. But I mean, he's so talented. I would still, I could see him possibly getting into that late first round, most likely second round though.
Yeah, this would be a guy where, if the Packers, if we're sitting here on draft night, if the Packers take George Pickens in the late first round, I wouldn't be against it. I would be for it, in my opinion. It wouldn't be much of a surprise to me. While I prefer Christian Watson, I do think Pickens will be a great player. The Packers could add at wide receiver and really help fill that hole left by Devontae Adams in that offense.
Yep.
And the other thing, I would love to get out to training camp and see him and Eric Stokes battle again. If you want to watch some great tape, go back and watch the practice battles between George Pickens and Eric Stokes at Georgia. They are just great one-on-one tape to look at. Two guys just going at it side by side. I would love to see that happen again in Green Bay. The two just going at it every single week at practice would be phenomenal to watch as a Packers fan.